Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's talk on the sound of fear. Today's talk on the sound of fear, we'll be trying to build a frightened brain with horror films. So let me give you a little introduction about who I am. My name is Leonardo Muller-Rodriguez. I research the intersection between music therapy and neuroscience. I am a PhD student at the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research, where they do music therapy research. And I am focusing on sleep music for dementia caregivers. I'm also a musician, composer, and music producer. So, how does this tie in with fear? Yeah, well, actually, when you don't sleep enough, you actually start perceiving everything as more threatening. Even things that are threatening are even more threatening. And things that are neutral are actually threatening as well. But don't worry, let's say you've increased your anxiety. There are some therapeutic interventions. You can take antidepressants, you can take therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies. And people are looking at specific sleep changes now, like increasing deep sleep because it's reduced. That's one of the things I'm interested in. Now, if we want to understand how a frightened brain is built with a horror film, we have to understand what is a horror film. A horror film is a film genre designed to elicit fear, terror, suspense, disgust for our entertainment. It explores disturbing and dark subject matters like insanity, ghosts, killers, gore, or found footage, which is literally discovering footage about a crime. Now, who here is a fan of horror films? Who likes horror films? Okay, fantastic. Who would like to tell me, would you like to tell me your favorite one? Sir.
Hereditary is a good one.
Hereditary, fantastic. How would you classify it in terms of subgenres?
It's kind of definitely insanity and ghosts and gore.
And gore, all right, that's triple.
A lot of boxes there.
Fantastic. Who else has a favorite film they would like to share? No one wants to do that now. Yes, my Dark Angel, how are you doing?
Oh yeah, I like Insidious.
Insidious, yeah. How would you describe it?
I put it psychological, supernatural.
Cool.
Those, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else wants to volunteer? All right. Oh, there is, yes, my lady. The Blair Witch Project, how would you describe it? Found footage. Fantastic. Okay, well, we're all kind of crazy to enjoy horror films, aren't we? So one of the reasons we might enjoy horror films is because it makes us excited. Who likes it because it makes them excited? Not many. Who likes it because it makes you scared and anxious and nervous? Yeah, okay, fantastic. So throughout this presentation, we'll be understanding what is a build-up scene and a jump scare. And this will be an example of this. I want you to think about the build-up, which is an anxious moment, and then the jump scare. Be ready. That was the Conjuring 2. So I'm sure you've noticed there's a build-up and a jump scare, right, when the nun comes out. What I want you to do, if you haven't got already a pen and paper, this is the exercise for you, ladies and gentlemen. What I want you to do throughout this presentation is we will create your horror film formula, which means you will have 3 bullet points to create your film. The first one is a relatable character. The second one is a fear-inducing element that will guide your horror story. And thirdly, the sound and music that will elicit fear and suspense. I will guide you through the presentation when you have to write this down. But first, let's understand what is fear in the brain. So when you're feeling fear, you're actually having some brain regions that are activating. So the ones I want you to focus on are amygdala and hippocampus, because they'll be coming back. In addition to having brain regions activating, you are feeling something in your body. When you're in fear, you have this upper body mainly activity. In contrast to anxiety, is more about the chest. And panic, where there's a bit of leg action here, maybe you're trembling or you're ready to run away, I don't know. And when you're observing a scene like the one we just looked at, there's a difference in where our eyes are looking around. We are trying to anticipate in the build-up scene, in contrast with the jump scare, we're anticipating where the threat is coming. Where's the threat? Where's the threat? But when the jump scare, everyone's looking at this nun, at the threat that is present. And this doesn't only happen with eyes. It also happens at the level of the brain. Brains synchronize, not only when you're watching a film, people are having their brains in synchronicity, but also when you're listening to music, for instance. But this is even more the case, more synchronicity between brains during jump scares. So this suggests there's an evolutionarily shared mechanism for threat detection in humans. Now, what I want you to focus here, there's a Hereditary fan here, is to see how the characters change their behavior with every extra tongue click. All right, so this was a perfect representation of fear conditioning. So how do you create a fearful memory? Well, there are two ways. The first way is, let's say you hear this note. And every time you hear this note, you get shocked electrically. So, okay? Every time. So next time you hear, you're gonna be scared, you're gonna get shocked, right? So that's called fear conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning, which is the association between a neutral stimulus, the note, and a threat. Another way to form a fearful memory is contextual based. So every time you're in the basement studio, you get shocked. So eventually you will think that the basement studio is a threatening place. All right, so this is the same thing but in the brain of a human. So here what you have is a snake in the context of a zoo, or encountering in the woods. You're asking yourself, am I in danger? Am I safe? And basically, the amygdala is processing the emotional, in this case, fear response, which is this red blob. And the hippocampus is responsible for the contextual, spatial, temporal, is it a zoo or woods information, which is this green blob. So the extra thing I want you guys to know about fear is that there are two brain pathways involved in fear. There's, okay, brain basics. The brain is a layered thing. And the higher the thing, the more abstract the processing is of the information, okay? So, and the lower the thing is more physiological basic stuff like, heart rate. So in this case, you see a threat. And your higher regions are going to be processing your subjective feeling of fear. Whereas the lower parts, subcortical, are processing everything that has to do with increasing heart rate and blood pressure. So that's what you'd like to keep in mind. So now you've learned a fearful association. Dogs are kind of scary. So what can you do? Well, there's actually therapy that can be done. You can do exposure therapy, which is you're exposed to the fearful stimulus without any dangerous consequences. So this time the dogs are friendly and they're licking you, and you've learned to forget that these are threatful. So let's say next time you see a dog, you'll be able to ask yourself, am I in danger or am I safe? There are other ways like eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR, which allows you to recover the fearful memories, and through the therapist's guidance of the eyes, you actually reduce the emotional importance. Another one is playing Tetris. This has been shown to reduce post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, PTSD, which is basically repeated fearful memories. Another art therapy is playing to music or listening to music. Finally, you can have pharmacological approaches, which I won't be your dealer for that. All right. So in essence, there are two things happening, two fear emotions. Anxiety, which is uncertain, suspenseful, unpredictable, which is more about abstract, distant concerns, whereas fear is more about a present threat. A very good example is a tiger is literally there, it's gonna eat you. And a pandemic is, if you're scared about it, it's more of an anxious feeling. This is the science showing that basically the more physically or socially or more hypothetically far the threat, the more anxious you'll be feeling, where the more physically and socially close the threat is more about a fear emotion. So how does this happen in horror films? Well, a build-up is an anxiety moment, whereas a shock moment, like this kid appearing, is the fear-inducing moment. Suspense. This is the soundtrack of a horror film from the 80s called Suspiria by Luca Guadagnino, the director. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna go for our first bullet points for your horror film formula. If you haven't got your papers, you can grab one at the back. We need a relatable character. Why do we need a relatable character? Well, it's because we want to generate empathy in the audience. And if we generate empathy, they can feel the threats of the character. This is neuroscience fact. The more you understand a speaker, like myself, the more our brains will be synchronized, just like in films. So how do you do this? You want to give them a weakness, a mistake, a regret, a fear. Think about yourself, a friend, a family member, an enemy. Give them a weakness for your character. Optionally, if you have time to think about one, give them a goal, a conflict. So what I want you to write down is a name, yours, a friend, a family member's, enemy, and give them a weakness. So you can build your first bullet point. So I'll give you a few seconds to think about a name, any name, and a fear of this character. We will now do our second bullet point. The second bullet point is the fear-inducing element that drives your horror story. So here I've got a list of clinical phobias, meaning things that are so scary that you have to go to the hospital. And it turns out that Hitchcock was spot on with his film Vertigo. It's one of the most scariest things, heights, vertigo. So your film can be about someone who's scared about heights, or there is a dentist doing weird things with its clients, I don't know. Can be scared of someone you know that's close becoming ill or dying. So this could be happening as zombie apocalypse, for instance, who knows. If you need more ideas for the fear-inducing element of your story to write down, the next item could help, which is something that resembles a human, but roughly 70 to 80%. That's where corpses, zombies, Frankenstein, vampires are. Those are the scary stuff. Because the other stuff are kind of friendly looking, you want to be next to it. But here, that's the perfect mix of a human, 80 to 70% to induce fear. All right, our third and final bullet point is the music and sound of fear. So why music, okay? That's because vision gives us a 220-degree angle understanding of our environment, whereas audio gives us a 360-degree understanding. So what I want you to keep in mind is that you will choose two sounds or music features for your build-up and jump scare scenes. We'll go through it after the science. So what you can do is make the music or the sound play at the same time as the visual things are happening. That's one way. Or you could do it separately. So it's kind of unpredictable. Why is the sound here, whereas this thing is happening here visually? Well, this study looked at, this is a build-up, music, and this is the shock moment, and this is the whole scene together. And they're measuring stress by looking at sweat levels on the skin, and this actually measures electrical conductivity in the higher stress. The higher the number, the higher the stress. So basically, music is a bit more stressful than no music, okay? And if you want to make it unpredictable, as here, that will increase the stress even more. So that's something you can keep in mind. Synchronicity with the visuals. This little guy. That wasn't very scary, was it? All right, let's try this. That's a bit scary. So we can see that harmonies and the music that's used is very important to give a different sense. Here, the sound texture of fear is shown to be noisier sounds. This basically means more fear-inducing, more fearful, high arousal, low valence. That's what it means. And a more precise measure, the more precise measure of noisiness in the sound is roughness. So here they're comparing human screams, and scream-like music, which is music that resembles screams, which is basically horror film soundtracks, compared to non-screaming vocalizations like ah, and non-scream music, which is more calm. And they show that the rougher the thing, the noise, the more fearful this is what it means. And more specifically, screams, vocalizations are scarier than music that mimics screams. So if you want to really scare your audience, use screams. But if you want to give a storytelling element, use music. That's exemplified in the next part, Psycho. Fun fact, the flesh sound is stabbing a watermelon. So, just to clarify, the roughness of a sound is exemplified with the cello sound that I used. Whereas a piano is less, right? So that's the roughness that was used here in, I'm stepping on my book, in the soundtrack here of Psycho, which is a film by Hitchcock, and the composer is Herman. Now, let's dive deeper into the musical elements that you can use to create your film soundtrack of a horror film. So here they've measured roughness, which is the fear-inducing element of music, and the harmonicity is how pure, of intervals. Intervals is the distance between two notes, and if you play two notes one after the other, that's the building block of a melody, whereas if you play two notes simultaneously, that's the building block of a chord. So let's have a look at the most rough or fear-inducing sound. Have a listen to this. Okay. Compared to the less fear-inducing sound, the perfect fifth. Hey. You hear the difference. Now, the roughest, most fear-inducing one has been used in the famous soundtrack that you're very likely to be familiar with. Ah, that's it. That's all you're getting today. So that's the interval that you're using. Okay, another one, the tritone, TT. This one is not as rough, but it was called the devil's interval at the medieval times. You couldn't use that one to make music. Maybe you were summoning the devil or something. Sorry, guys. All right, and the very last one I want you to have a listen to is the minus seventh, which is this one. Which, if you play it differently, it is actually a major second as well. So there you go. Now, because we're talking about music, and let's make use of its storytelling capacity, which is using musical themes. Here in The Shining, a film by Kubrick, the composers Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elking made a very clever use of a death theme, a historical death theme called Dies Irae, which is a Latin poem from the 12th century, and the music was from the Renaissance 14th century, used as a requiem, a Catholic Christian mass of the dead. That's where it is, the music. And here, listen to the eerie synthesizers that are at the back as well. Spooky. That's the opening scene. That's the first shots you get to see. Now, as a reminder of what is the sound and music of fear, we can analyze sound and music as two ways. Consonant sounds, which are more harmonious, more attractive to listen to, more pure, or dissonant sounds, which are more rough and noisier and more aversive to listeners. For instance, screams in terms of vocalizations, or speech in terms of consonant vocalizations. So, ladies and gentlemen, for your bullet point of music and sounds, what I want you to do is choose one of these for your suspense, anxiety, build-up moment. You want to use irregular rhythms by varying the tempo, combining silence and non-rhythmic sections, slow increase of the tempo, so that means acceleration, or intensifying of the rhythmic complexity until the shock moment arrives. You can also make use of low frequencies to mimic heartbeats. For your shock moment, the jump scare, you want to use aligned rhythms with the visual shock. You can use rough sounding vocalizations, noisier instruments. You can also make use of binaural beats at 6 Hertz. If you're curious about this, you can ask me a question about 6 Hertz binaural beats later on. Now, because we're making a film, I'm just going to give you a bit of visual techniques, right? So here we go.
Pinpoint all the techniques we've just covered.
This is a hospital. People, illness.
Here are the answers. How many did you get right?
Suspense. The camera doesn't move. You don't know where to look at. There's so many things happening. Is this guy important? Maybe not. I don't know. No music in this case. And ching, that's the sting. Music that's in the same time as the jump scare. All right. So we've got a recipe for disaster, don't we? Before we share each other's recipe for disaster, I would like to compose our horror film soundtrack together. And how we will do that? So we will, when I do this, we will all do boo, okay? And we will increase the tempo and the volume. And when I do, we all scream. All right. So here we go. Woo, 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 Woo! 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 Ah! Thank you. Now we're ready to share each other's horror film formula. Who would like to share their horror film formula? Come on. So who wants to share their relatable character, the name and weakness? Yes, we have one. Etienne, French name. Okay.
Scared of any
Horizons?
Yeah.
Scared of horizons?
Landscape.
Okay, he becomes nauseous with landscapes. Very nice, very nice. How about the fear-inducing element of your horror story? What's driving that? Have you thought about that?
He's standing facing a cliff.
Standing facing a cliff. Wow, yeah, that's got to be very scary for him, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of decisions to make there. That are important. Have you got any sound or music for your...
Yeah. Wind, high pitch, long tone.
Okay, suspenseful winds. Let's see what I can do. Silence as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, very enthusiastic audience members here. They're not my parents. They're not my parents. An owl, fantastic. An owl. Let's look at an owl then. Thank you very much for sharing. That's very kind. We might have time for another one if anyone is brave enough to share. Is anyone? I know it's a bit, you can put yourself in the spot. Like, oh, we have one. Yes, go.
His name's Luke.
Luke, name? Yeah.
Afraid of moths.
Moths. Oh, insects. Yeah. And what's the fear-inducing elements that you've got?
He has a fine collection of knitwear.
Knitwear. That's very scary.
Like flapping wings and maybe banging against light bulbs.
Oh, so he hears that all the time. That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I'm gonna replicate the flapping for the sounds, right? That's what you, with very big moths appearing once in a while. Not that. Sorry. It's a big moth. That's a big moth. That's a peak moment, right? That jump scare. Thank you for sharing. Well, we have time for some Q&As now, if you have any questions. My name is Leonardo Muller-Rodriguez, PhD student in Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research. And if you have any questions that you think about later on, scan this so you can check out my Music Science YouTube channel and ask me questions there. But please, I'm open for some Q&As. Q&As. Anyone has a question? Yes. Oh, favorite soundtrack film. You know, I grew up enjoying a lot the Star Wars, but it's not very scary. Well, there might be some moments. I watched The Substance last week, or 2 weeks ago. It's a new film that's it's very electronic, actually, based, and it's really scary. It's a gore film. I would say those are pretty nice ones, and contrasting type. Thank you for the question. Anyone else has a question? Yes, Dark Angel.
When you watch horror movies with this sort of through this lens of what is the music, what is the performance makes the movie, do you find it detracts from your own enjoyment of the film in terms of the fear factor because you're overanalyzing it?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't watched one since I've made the formula. Might have to try that. But I think it would probably help me detach from the fear, right? Because you can think about stuff which helps you detach. Okay, this is just using this technique, or this using this. That could be one way. Or you just shut down your brain and let yourself enjoy the horror. Thank you. We have a question.
What about like when things are scarier in films because they're playing happy music and you're expecting it to be very creepy, or you've had creepy music and suddenly it's happy and sad.
Right, yeah, it's kind of playing with your emotions, right? I would say it's going towards anxiety, suspense building, because you know you're going to be there for a horror film, right? You know you're going to get scared, and suddenly they're playing this music. You're kind of expecting, when is it going to change? That's my interpretation. Good question, thank you. Yes, sir?
How does your department feel about you analyzing this from the other side? It almost seems like using music therapy for evil. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually very excited to talk about it to them. They haven't had the opportunity to see the presentation. Yeah. They were curious to know what costume I was going to wear, but I will come back to them with that. I agree with you. It's an interesting point in terms of music therapy. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
Hi, have you thought about smell and the relationship between sound and smell and all that?
I haven't thought about it in terms of this context of horror films. I do know, what I know about smell is that the olfactory neurons from your nose go straight into your dopamine regions. So that's something interesting. So you can easily hit your dopamine with smelling. But I don't know how you can do that for a sphere. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
You mentioned binaural beats.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're typically used for meditation, so
Yeah.
how would you use them in a horror sense?
So the study that I mentioned just proved that when you have music playing, I'll just show you an image. You have music playing and you put these tones. So these are, camera. So what happens, a binaural beat, for those who don't know, it's you put a certain tone at a certain frequency here, and you play it at a different frequency here, and the difference in terms of frequencies synchronizes your brain to that rhythm. So here they just compared music plus no binaural beats, and they compared it to music plus a binaural beat at 6 hertz. And people they just said it was fearful. So they found it more fearful, which is a curious thing, especially my colleagues in sleep music. They're interested in binaural beats, but they're into 4 hertz and 2 hertz. I just wanted to show this because it was an interesting study. Definitely it's used for relaxation most of the time. Yeah. Cool, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. See you very soon. Thank you.